Hello, Bill.
Good evening, Matt.
This is weird. This is like Baywatch Nights. We're taping this way past my bedtime. It's almost 9 o'clock at night.
Well, typically at 9 o'clock, you're hanging with Anderson Cooper.
That's true.
So you're trading up and talking to me.
Yeah.
So I know
it's a parallel
grateful. But you've had to get. I mean, you've been doing late shift on CNN, and that's like you do early shift on CNN the day after. And I know, I know you like your rest. I know when you come on here, your proper rest. You get grouchy.
I do.
When you got angry, on CNN with Jay Sekulow. I'm pronouncing his name wrong. And I bet you did not get your rest.
I think that's what happened. I did not get enough rest. I was probably a little hungry, a little grumpy. No, it was interesting. I would say the feedback I got it's been about 70% positive. The feedback has been really good.
Not everybody watches Anderson Cooper. It might surprise you.
I assume everyone knows.
Tell folks what happened.
All right, so Wednesday night I was on Anderson Cooper's show, and we were talking about the Comey, the forthcoming Comey testimony, and this guy Jay Sekulow, who American Center for Long anyway, long time.
He's a lawyer for the religious right.
Yeah, like religious liberty stuff, mostly stuff that I agree with. I would say. I think he might be Jewish, but it's a lot of Christian stuff, I feel like. Anyway, whatever, be that as it may. So he was on, and he had just visited with President Trump that day. We were in New York, but he was via satellite from D.C. And I'm not sure why he was on. Like, well, it was sort of, I'm not sure like why. That didn't necessarily make sense to me, but he clearly came in there with like an agenda. And I don't know if he's trying to get a job with Trump or just show Trump how tough he was, but he clearly came in there with the goal of doing two things. Like, one, I'm going to be contentious. I'm going to like take on these media people, these mainstream media people. And two, I'm going to destroy the credibility of James Comey. And it was very obvious that was his strategy. And I suspect it's probably a harbinger of things to come. They're gonna put instead of Donald Trump being on trial, they want James Comey to be on trial. And it's sort of like, who was the old prosecutor in the Clinton Lewinsky trial?
Ken Starr.
It's sort of like what they did to Ken Starr. That's what they're going to do to Comey. And so he had done this all night. It was a long segment or two, and he had interrupted people constantly. Jennifer Granholm was a prime example. And then when I started talking, he kept interrupting me and like trying to ask me questions as if he were like interrogating me or interviewing me. And I basically shut that down. The body has a way of shutting that shit down. So like I wouldn't let him do it. And I would start talking. He would ask me a question. I would try to answer. Or actually, I was trying to change the subject to talk about what I wanted to talk about. Because frankly, like, who the hell is he to tell me what I was going to talk about? And he would keep like asking me questions. And I basically like shut it down. And I'm like, I sort of lost it a little bit. The good news is I went back and I watched the tape, and I'm smiling most of the time. I think like I said, that it's been about 70% of the feedback I've gotten has been positive. But I did make an ad hominem attack. I called him a partisan hack, which he is.
Yeah, I mean, is that ad hominem, or is that just calling him out?
Well, I would like to think the latter. And I got a lot of feedback from people who said like, thank you for doing that. He was interrupting people all night. He was making it unbearable. Someone needed to shut him down. Someone needed to call him out. Thank you for doing it. And again, I mean, these might just be liberals. I don't know who were just glad that somebody did it. But it is interesting, though, because, that same day I went on a different CNN show, and I thought I had a pretty eloquent take on the Paris deal, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and that didn't get as much play, but like getting into a fight with Jay Sekulow, calling him a partisan hack, got me a Mediaite story and a couple other outlets too. And obviously I don't do it for that, but it's funny how that works.
So let's get back to the manometer here. You were in your CNN sparring with Sekulow. You were I would say that Comey's credibility is not fair. He shouldn't be smeared in this process. You're taking the investigation into the Russia ties seriously. That'll put your manometer theoretically in the Harding to Nixon range. But here you are today, Thursday evening, you just read a piece of the Daily Beast praising Trump for pulling out of the Paris deal. Is he back towards, is he Teddy Roosevelt? Is he Ronald Reagan? Where are we right now?
I'm not feeling good. I mean, I'm defending the things that I think are right, and I mean, I am a conservative, so, and honestly, I mean, we'll talk about that Paris deal, but it seems like a bad deal to me, like, and just the liberal, like, it's the end of the world. I mean, some of the stuff was really over the top.
It's actually about the world. It's somebody you say it's the end of the world, and it's about some particular issue. This is like actually about the world, and that it might kind of end.
Well, I get yeah, okay. So I just think I'm done with Trump. Like, I'm not mad at Trump. I mean, like, he's not Nixon in the sense that, like, I don't feel like that we're in the Watergate scandal right now, like I did a few weeks ago. But it is sort of Nixonian just overall. Like, it's just a guy who I'm basically done with him, I mean, I was just reluctantly hoping for the best. And, just the tweets and the, he doesn't have any, he's very childish, as you know, he doesn't have impulse control. He can't string together any successes.
So you're saying, if I understand you correctly, that the manometer is broken. It can't get to Teddy Roosevelt or Ronald Reagan anymore. Even if he does something you like pulling out of Paris, he can only get so far in the manometer. I mean, maybe what's the ceiling now? Is it Eisenhower?
Yeah.
H.W. Bush.
We know what they say. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, don't get fooled again. And so I don't think, like, I just don't think it's sort of like the stepdad or the deadbeat dad who, like, promises he was going to take you out for your birthday and then he doesn't show up. You know what I mean? Like, eventually you quit, like, getting excited that he's going to show up and take you to a ball game. Not to sound paternalistic about the president, but I think he might be a deadbeat dad. We've given up on him showing up for the ball game.
All right. Well, let's talk Paris. That is the news of the day. It is a rare case.
By the way, I did see Paris Can Wait.
I don't know what happens in your movie theaters these days. I'm chained to the house. I don't know what's going on in popular culture.
This is Francis Ford Coppola's wife, who's like 80 years old, made her first movie, and it's loosely based on, like, her life with her husband. And so Alec Baldwin is like a movie producer or whatever, and his wife, what's her name? Diane Ladd, whatever. She's been around a long time. So Alec Baldwin gets called away on business, and his wife, they're in Cannes, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so he has to go do something, and his French business partner drives his wife to Paris. And of course, being a French guy, he's hitting on her the whole way, They're eating at these great restaurants. It's basically food porn and tourism porn. There's a lot. It's beautiful. Okay, you may have guessed it. I didn't decide to go see this movie online. This was someone else's. I was taken to the movies. Anyway, so that was my piece about it. Is titled "Paris Can Wait."
So it's a rare case where you and I have written hot takes in the news cycle on the same subject. That doesn't usually happen with us.
Oh yeah.
So your piece argues that based on certain studies, the cost would be high, the payoff would be low, therefore it's a bad deal, and even if you believe that you accept the climate science, you think global warming is a problem, you should not be harangued for believing that this deal is not the right deal, correct?
Yeah. I would say there are two primary reasons. One is that the criteria for entering into the deal was not consistent. So America got a different deal than China, and China got a different deal. It was basically you would voluntarily make a pledge to do X. And President Obama made a very ambitious pledge, which I think, cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 26 to 28% would be a pretty draconian impact on our energy and the economy and the jobs. So, and then what do you get out of it? Like, in 100 years, you've managed to cut you've managed to stem warming by a fraction of 1 degree Celsius. Like, if all goes well, it just doesn't seem. And then the hand wringing about it being the end of the world over that. Is it worth it? Like, this is a public policy decision, right? I mean, it's just like saying, like, if you were dying, and you would be like, you can take chemo, but you're going to have to deal with the sickness, or you can try to ride it out and maybe have another good 5 or 10 years. It's a bad choice, but you sort of weigh do a cost benefit analysis. Is it worth losing jobs? Is it worth, and see, that's the thing I think that a lot of liberals aren't doing is it's like, it's a problem. We have to do whatever it takes to solve it. And the thing is, maybe that's true if you could solve it, but if you can't solve it, if all you can do is minimally impact it, and yet it's going to really hurt a lot of Americans, I think that's at least debatable whether or not we should do it.
Well, there's a lot of premises there that people would debate. There is. Your argument's based on we're doing a draconian thing, and other people are getting off light for very little payoff. So a lot of folks would say that our pledge, 25% cut, I think by 2025, is actually not that heavy a lift. It's something that was going to be accomplished largely through market forces. Even Obama's Clean Power Plan wasn't asking the states to do too much, and was premised on you're doing a lot of this stuff anyway. Let's get the ball rolling. Let's set up a framework for cutting carbon, but we're not going to ask you for too steep a cut right off the bat. There is, a lot of these international negotiations are centered on who is most responsible, who does have the burden of chipping in the most. On one hand, China has surpassed us as being the biggest emitter as of today, but over the past century, we're the ones who have done the lion's share, and the stuff that we've spewed out is still in the atmosphere. So you can't forget that that's already happened. So telling China, say, you know what, you can start doing real cuts after 2030. That's not saying China can go pollute willy-nilly till 2030. It's saying as you get the ball rolling and getting your your carbon cutting tools into place, if the actual cuts don't actually kick in till 2030, that's okay. But you still have to you can't wait till 2029 to do that. You got to get started. And there are countries, like India, who are even less well developed than China. They're actually a stickier wicket, I think, than China is, because India is saying, look, we're trying to be an economic power here. You guys got to spew all this pollution and build your economies. We cut us some slack, and trying to figure out how much can they be expected to do was one of the stickier aspects of the negotiation. So that's the climate pledge side. There are various studies on how much temperature reduction we would achieve. The range that I have seen, and this was a World Resources Institute analysis of the various studies that are out there. If we do nothing, you add 4 to 5 degrees to the global climate by the end of the century, and most people say we need to get below 2 degrees of a rise. Some people say 1.5 degrees. The pledges, as they stand, at best, would limit it to 2.7 degrees Celsius. So 0.7 over what, either 0.7 over what we think we have to do, or 1.2. So that's not great. That's not solving the problem in one fell swoop. But there is a mechanism in the agreement to say, hey, let's reconvene every 5 years. Let's see where we're at. Let's see what the science says. If we got to tighten things up as we go along, we can do that. You can say that's all overly optimistic. You can say all these pledges they're non-binding, they're voluntary, there's no enforcement mechanism. I get all that. I mean, the people on the left that would say that too. But if you think that's what's weak about the deal, the response is, here's how I'd make it a stronger deal and cut more emissions. To say, I'm going to walk away and let this go, past 4 degrees without. I mean, Trump says he's going to renegotiate. What for? What? I mean, I don't even know what he wants to renegotiate to do. Is it to make the burden lighter on us, so we do less? That's not solving the problem. That's making it hard to solve the problem. I haven't seen a lot of here's what the better deal is from anybody.
No, Jake Tapper asked Scott Pruitt that today, and really couldn't get an answer. So I don't think there is one yet.
I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, I think, Trump, Pruitt, a lot of these guys, they don't care. They don't believe global warming is a problem. And they just want to, let the world be safe for coal. I picked up from you, and again, if I'm getting you wrong, correct me. I think there's a part that feels like, hey, this is a problem, but I don't think it's a solvable problem, and we might just have to live with what comes. Am I summarizing you accurately?
Well, I don't know that there's, I don't know that there may be a solution out there, and it could be innovation. But my take is most of the solutions that I've seen, the cost to America and to American workers is steep, and the benefit, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is, and the mitigating of warming is not very good. So we would. I need to find the analogy to. I mean, I know you get it, but I need to find the analogy just in general to explain this to people on TV or whatever. There has to be one, but it seems to me that doing a cost benefit, it doesn't make sense, because even if we make all these sacrifices, we're just cutting the temperature by such a small margin. And that's if everything goes right and the projections are right and people stay in the agreement and honor the agreement, and because, as you mentioned, it's non-binding. So it just doesn't make sense to me.
So the piece that I wrote in Politico after this is, will Trump make you care about climate change. And we've already seen with Obamacare. Obamacare had pulled pretty badly through most of Obama's presidency, never got majority support. It had some spikes. It wasn't in the gutter, but it was below 50%, I think, the whole time. Then Trump begins to follow through on a pledge to repeal Obamacare. All of a sudden, it's over 50% approval. Once people started to think about, wait a second, what am I losing here? Then approval shot up. So might we see a similar dynamic with climate change? Now we're losing Paris. You're starting to see Democrats really talk about this being a premier issue for 2020, and something that people might not appreciate is that Democrats haven't really prioritized climate change politically through much of the last 30 years. Not that they don't care at all, of course. And Obama certainly did what he could with the Clean Power Plan and with Paris, but you don't see the same kind of passion and intensity that you see with economic inequality or with healthcare. I mean, obviously there is certainly an environmental community that cares about climate very much. I'm not saying these folks don't exist, but it's always been a little second tier. And on top of the fact that most Republicans don't prioritize it at all, and that's in large part because and there's actually a big study about this that was done by 2 University of Oregon professors in 2012. They actually pinpointed here the 6 reasons why climate change tends not to get passionate grassroots focus. And a lot of it is the concept is very abstract. It's not like you lack health care, you can't get the doctor. You feel that right now. What is the temperature increase in the year 2100? That's very abstract. You talk about, well, we're feeling certain impacts of it today. Well, those impacts are very scattered, and they can't be directly pinpointed to climate change all the time. And you can't even pinpoint the individual person who's causing it. There is no one thing that's causing it. And the fact that we're all causing it in some way is a hard thing for people to want to accept. I'm personally guilty for this. I don't want to believe that. And since you can't even precisely articulate what exactly the problem is going to be going forward, that can breed uncertainty breeds wishful thinking. Is one of the things that they pointed out. And on top of all that, there's a concept that they called moral tribalism. So liberals tend to frame issues in terms of harm and fairness, and conservatives take those two and add to it what they call protection of the in-group. And there were specific things they added on top of that in terms of loyalty to authority and purity and sanctity and things like that. So the way liberals talk about climate change does not click with what conservatives want to hear. And since we live in such a polarized society, once you look at an issue that's sort of not your issue, your views harden even more. And they say this in the study, you're going to be very apt to accept evidence that fits with your preconceived view, and you're going to be very skeptical of information that doesn't fit with your preconceived view. So you have folks left, tearing their hair out. Why can't people see the facts? Why can't they accept the science? And it's because once it's been set that climate change is a liberal concern and not a conservative concern, almost everything else flows from that, and you develop a hostility, a morally based hostility to the other side. So everything about this issue makes it very hard to engender bipartisan cooperation, dialogue based on the same set of facts, all that kind of thing. So this action to pull out of Paris in and of itself probably just exacerbates the current dynamic. Everyone's still on their red and blue sides on this. You may see on the blue side a a amped up attitude about it. Maybe it becomes a higher priority issue than it was 48 years ago. Every 2020 Democrat candidate is going to have in the platform, I pledge to return to Paris. That's going to be a standard applause line.
Right, because isn't it true that the that we don't actually officially withdraw from it until like the day after the 2020 election or something?
Right. But up until now, even amongst Democrats, if you said, are you worried about climate change? A very small fraction would say, I am very worried about climate change. A plurality would say, I'm somewhat worried about climate change. It's just not, even amongst those that accept the science, it's still not as visceral. And you have, and on the Republican side, about a third of Republican voters and about a third of Trump primary voters, so core Trump voters, about a third of them say, I believe climate change is fueled by human activity, and I am worried about it. Just not necessarily very worried about it, maybe somewhat worried about it. And so you don't make it a priority issue. So Democrats will surely make it a priority issue going forward. Can you get that faction of Republicans that do accept the science and are kind of worried about it but don't prioritize it? I wouldn't think this in and of itself would bring them over, but even though there's no automatic enforcement mechanism in the Paris Pact, you have heard some countries talk about implementing a carbon tariff, slapping a carbon tariff on America, saying if you're not going to do your part here, if you're not going to play by the same rules as everybody else, we're not going to let you get a competitive advantage for that. You're going to have to pay for the carbon you put in the atmosphere one way or the other, and this is what we're going to make you do. And that'd be a very extreme step. I can't predict that they're going to do that, but if they did, you would have Trump, self-styled champion of coal, warrior against globalism, defender of American sovereignty. He would be the cause of Americans paying a internationally imposed carbon tax, literally the worst nightmare that any populist nationalist conservative could come up with. And so if you're going to the grocery store or you're filling up your gas tank and you're paying a carbon tax to Europe or to Canada or Mexico because of this, it's possible that just reinforces the polarized divisions. You want to stand with Trump and fight the globalists even more, but you might also say, wait a second, I'm paying for this one way or the other. I'm not even getting anything out of this carbon tax. We could have done this ourselves. I could get consumer rebate. I could have followed into clean energy jobs in my community. I'm just now send this money overseas because Trump didn't know how to do a good deal. That's ridiculous.
Well, I don't think a lot of people are going to put that together, even if that scenario plays out. I think it'll be the former theory where people would just be pissed off. But hey, what'd you make of the fact that the Trump White House was divided over this? You had apparently Rick Perry and Rex Tillerson and Ivanka and Jared wanting to stay in, and then you had Pruitt and Bannon wanting to withdraw.
This is the first time, I think, since the travel ban, where I'd say the Bannon side won a policy fight. The Bannon side clearly has Trump's ear when it comes to the politics, the combative spirit. But time and time again, Trump has flinched from following through. Just today, he did not follow through on moving the Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. 2 days after Sonny Perdue became Ag Secretary, he convinced Trump not to pull out of NAFTA by showing him a map. Here are all the farmers you're going to screw over if you pull out of NAFTA today. And he flinched on that. He hasn't pulled out the Iran deal yet. Now, of course, we got a lot of time left to go. Maybe he will one of these days, but he hasn't yet. He hasn't called China currency manipulator. I mean, he's actively, explicitly said, here's why I'm not going to follow through on my campaign pledge on China. So he's always had an ear open to what less ideological corporate interests have to say. And in this case, it's not just Ivanka, it's not just Rex Tillerson, it's not just Rick Perry, it's the Pope, it's almost every corporation, even coal companies were saying to Trump, hey, we want to get help with clean coal technology, carbon capture and storage, and we want to have access to foreign markets to sell this stuff. So if you walk away from the table, the international table, we may not get these things. The CEO of Exxon was directly talking to Trump saying, look, we want, this is what these guys want. They want certainty. We talk about economic certainty all the time. They want certainty. Here are the rules of the road. Here's what people need to accomplish. Exxon is fully prepared to say, look, let's get into the clean energy game. We know that oil's not going to be around forever, but we don't want to get beat by an upstart. We want to know what the rules of the road are going to be and invest in what the future is, and just tell us what the rules will be, and we'll do it. And despite all of that, Trump did not listen to it. So I don't want to play mind reader, but I have to think that part of it is Trump's getting beat upside the head every day on the Russia investigation. His legislative agenda is in a black hole when it comes to Congress. Despite all the happy talk today, the tax reform bill's going nowhere, healthcare's going nowhere. He needs to pocket some kind of win somewhere to get.
Do you think they're dead? I mean, do you think that healthcare and tax reform are dead? Do you think it's just done?
I think healthcare is done. I don't see how you get out of that pickle. I don't want to totally write off tax reform yet, but it certainly strikes me as exceedingly difficult. They don't even have a bill. They don't have a mechanism to do it through a revenue neutral mean that would allow them to do it through reconciliation. That'd be filibustered. If they wanted us to do Bush style tax cuts for everybody, that would require getting Democratic votes. And maybe they did it under Bush. It's hard to get every Democrat to say I'm going to vote against a tax cut. So maybe they could pull that off. So that's the one part of me that says maybe, but there's not a lot of evidence that they even know how to do it. I mean, Trump, Mr. R, the deal, does not know how to craft a legislative deal. One thing he can do is knock down a tower of blocks. So here's something he can actually do. I can walk away from this by myself. No one can stop me. I'll make the base happy, and I'll be seen as being proactive for this day and not just constantly under siege. I imagine at some level you get tired of losing every day, and you want to have some day where you are setting the agenda.
It could be as simple as that. We'll see. It's June already. Amazing that they haven't.
But does this mean that does he get a taste for it? And they say, well, if I did this, I'll walk away from NAFTA too, and I'll stop paying those Obamacare subsidies. This is one case where if you walk away, the impact is not immediate. If carbon tariffs are going to happen, they're not going to happen tomorrow. Who knows if they would even happen in this term. If you walked away from NAFTA, you might get a price shock immediately. If you stop paying Obamacare subsidies, the insurance markets might unravel immediately. So this was a case where he didn't have that same level of risk, though he still might get bit down the road.
Indeed. Wow. What else happened this week? Is that it?
Well, you had a piece, despite your pathetic flocking for Trump on Paris, you did just the day before. You wrote a piece, criticizing conservatives for treating Trump as their dear leader.
That piece did pretty well. Remember the Hope Hicks? What was it? She gave a quote to the Washington Post about dear leader, how great Donald Trump is, and it was sad and pathetic. And then Dennis Prager wrote this piece about Trump, how he's our general, and we need to, the never Trumpers need to report for duty. And so I sort of did a riff on that about how, it's really sad and pathetic how they do talk about, Trump. His team talks about him the way that like North Koreans talk about Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un or whatever. And so I was making fun of that a little bit. But, it is funny. I do think the people who work for him view him as the general or the CEO or daddy. And the argument I make in that piece is that, he works for us. We don't work for him.
I want to tie a couple of things together. Maybe if this we should go in part because my computer laptop battery is going to die. But Trump has been much sweeter to authoritarian leaders than democratically elected leaders. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Putin, Duarte in the Philippines. He kicks our NATO allies in the teeth. I don't think I'm the first person to say he's not really being leader of the free world. Merkel's being leader of the free world. Trump is being leader of authoritarians. So to what extent is that just his personality, or to what extent is that reflective of an authoritarian streak amongst conservatives? You just had in Montana with Gianforte. We're a week late to this, but he not just body slams a reporter. According to Fox News, he put his arms around his neck and he was punching him. And you had a lot of Republican members in Montana saying, good. You have anecdotes going up to reporters saying they should have popped you one. And people calling the rush saying, I want to see more of that. Is this a new thing in conservatism? Is it an old thing in conservatism? Is it disturbing to you that this authoritarian streak seems to be, if not persistent, but perhaps increasing? How damning is this to the conservative project?
All right. So first, I would say I think there is a certain amount of logic to being nicer to bad people than being nicer to good people. I mean, like you would expect France and England to behave a certain way. They're part of the family. And sometimes you can treat your brothers a certain way, but if there's a bad hombre down the street and you're trying to win him over, you may have to put on some extra charm to do that.
Now, when Obama was extra charming to Iran and was putting pressure on Israel, that was not the conservative attitude.
No, you're right. But do you agree with me that I'm not saying it's a smart way to operate, but there is an argument for it.
Right? I mean, I think Obama was correct in both of those cases. But you do want to be, you want to have in both cases a laudable objective. I mean, the objective in both those cases was peace in the Middle East. And you want to be careful not to give away the store or to folks who are on the other side. But
in terms of politeness, he treated the Iranians better than the Israelis.
Sure. But in terms of what's Trump trying to achieve here? What's he trying to get out of Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Russia and the Philippines? And what is he trying to extract from NATO allies? All he seems to want of the NATO allies is more payments to NATO, which has got to be chump change. And what does he really want out of all these other authoritarian countries? I couldn't quite tell you, except I think it's in sync with his own nationalist belief that nations should get to operate without those annoying human rights concerns, and he's going to give cover to those who share his view.
Right. So to specifically answer your question, I think very clearly Trump has authoritarian tendencies. And I think that the right is divided, or the conservatism is divided amongst this issue. I think that there's always been the sort of Franco-Pinochet wing of the right that is always, it's Law and Order, Nixon, and they prize loyalty and hierarchy and Law and Order. But I'm from the more Burkean wing that believes in ordered liberty, which is a little bit different than just Law and Order. And I think that there's also so there's a schism on the right, and there's an authoritarian half, probably. And then I think there's another half that is a small R Republican that really questions authority, thinks it's very dangerous to have a messianic impulse toward the way that we view politicians. And I think that's also a proud conservative tradition. So I think I think it's divided. I think that cleavage is very evident now in a way that had been laying dormant for a long time. I am very concerned about it, and I think it's really scary and troubling that we would root for. I mean, look, say what you will about journalists, a lot of them are liberally biased, but we need them to hold powerful people accountable and to tell us what's going on. And the idea that an American would root for a politician to beat up somebody, anybody, but a journalist specifically, is so troubling.
Spoken like a true cultural liberal media elitist.
Well, it's funny, Bill. Like, if I'm being honest, when I think, like, if I was 18 and this had happened, the Gianforte thing in Montana, I would have thought, well, we don't know what really happened, but the Gianforte guy, they're portraying him. They're trying to make him look bad. He's probably a hell of a great guy, probably a really good guy. And the reporter is clearly a smug, condescending leftist who I'm sure provoked it. I would have, in my heart of hearts, truly believed that it was being misrepresented. But now that I've been in this for many years, and I know people like Gianforte, Republican politicians, who are jerks. They're horrible people. The sort of macho, I'm going to show you how rich I am, how tough I am. They're just asses. And then some of these journalists, like, I don't know Ben Jacobs that well. I don't even know if I've ever met him in person, but I bet you he's a super nice guy and a pretty mild-mannered guy. I know his type. I mean, I know a lot of journalists and reporters and stuff. And so, like, now, it would be like the time I had to explain to my mom that Bill O'Reilly was actually a bad person. I'm probably.
Was that a hard day?
Yeah, it was. I would probably have to explain to her about how, like, this reporter is probably, like, a really good guy, and the Republican politician was probably a total jerk.
Well, I'm going to leave it on that uplifting note because I think my computer is going to zonk out any second.
All right, another award-winning episode.
Great to talk to you. It's a pleasure to talk to you in the evening.
Yeah, it's Baywatch nights. DMZ nights. Get
some rest.
Yeah, I need to get some sleep. I hope I didn't yawn too much and make other people yawn.
Well, till next week. What can people read from you until they get another fill of us next week?
I'll go read my piece. Paris Can Wait. And I'm trying to get my Facebook page going. So it's facebook.com/MattLewisDC. So follow me there. I'm trying to ramp up my Facebook is even though I like Twitter, it's intuitive for me. I need to have a better Facebook presence, so come see me there.
All right. Check out my Politico piece on Trump and climate change. Also have a Gianforte piece from last week, Montana's Charles Sumner moment. Check that out. And
I like that.
And we'll see you next week.
Oh, yeah. One more thing.
Yeah.
Let's do a plug for Carl Cannon as a new book.
Oh, yeah.
I forget what it's called. It's based on his emails, the morning emails.
We'll do a proper plug next week.
We'll plug it next week, but you can pre-order it on Amazon. I'll get the title, and we'll. But he's a great guy, and those are. Is it called This Day in History, something like that?
You put me on the spot. I don't remember. He told me, and when I saw it, and I can't remember.
Well, I'm clearly demonstrating that I don't know it either. But the great news is Carl will never see this. I can guarantee you, Carl will never watch or listen to this. So we'll be more prepared next week.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
And the book's not out till July anyway,
Okay.
so
Plenty of time to
pre-order next week. All right. See you guys.
Right.